Yeah, there you go.
Just like I think I need to send you a bill.
Okay.
Nobody's gonna.
We're just wrapping up our paving stuff here.
I don't even
I was there long before they came up with those words.
I've been trying to get some of the other things done here right now.
right there with you.
I know you're doing something like, yeah, let's let stuff slow down here a little bit.
Did you want to
Let me check. We were talking about getting along.
Join it.
One of our others. That's probably
And I do think we can take some of it forward. So if you want to get up while we're having a discussion and get some snacks, I think that'd be okay. There's no problem with that. There'll be plenty of time for questions and answers, I think. Welcome to our Chautauqua. This is the first in a while that BW Greenway has sponsored. I think most of you know, but I'll just go over BW Greenway, a conservation easement organization. All the properties that we have are on this poster over here. They're very much up to date. There's also a brochure with those properties that some public parks here both in Bath Township, City of Fairborn, Clark County. But some of private properties as well. It's our job to make sure that to monitor those easements in perpetuity. We're very excited to sponsor this topic. I personally live on the Mad River, so it's a very important topic to me. But I think no matter where you live, you are impacted by stormwater and its management. So let's be educated about that. If nothing else, because we should be informed citizens, and we make decisions based upon information that we learn at discussions like this at Chautauqua. So thank you very much. If talking about our properties, this map is also in a brochure over on the table. But Bob Jurek will be doing a drive around this Saturday, looking at properties that BW Greenway monitors, and he knows the most about them, and it's a very entertaining trip as well as informative. So without further ado, I'll introduce the panel, or let them introduce the panel. Angela Mazuzak will do that, and let's all learn. Thank you very much for coming. One other thing, I think everybody signed up, but if you did sign up, please do so. If you'd like to get email from BW Greenway, there's that opportunity. But even if you don't, please sign up, and we can at least mark that you were here. That's important to us. Angela.
All right. Good evening. I hope you all can hear me and or see me from this spot. If not, I'll move this little guy. There we go. I am Angela Manuzak. I'm very pleased that Bob invited me to come and moderate your discussion tonight. After 30 plus years in kind of an accidental environmental career, I am pleased and happy to continue my work after retiring from the Miami Conservancy District with 20 years there. Now I'm working for a private consultant, and just today had my first non-point source implementation strategy, 9-element plan approved by Ohio EPA, a very long and arduous process, and I'm hoping that you all can rejoice with me that it is finished. And so I'm hoping I can draw out a lot of good questions from you and directed at our esteemed panel. But first, let's have them introduce themselves so that we know it really is a very strong panel. Congratulations to you guys to put this together. So, Dr. Ritter, perhaps you could begin with just an introduction of yourself.
Sure. I'm John Ritter. I teach geology and environmental science at Wittenberg University, and I have a background in soil and water conservation.
My name is Leanne McCullough, and I am a stormwater education consultant. I work in municipalities to help them with their stormwater permits with the EPA and educating their public.
My name is Don O'Connor. I'm the chief engineer at the Miami Conservancy District. I've been there for the last 5 years. The 4 years before that, I was the city engineer for the city of Fairborn. So those last 9 years have really been the time in my career where I've spent with more of a focus on water. When I got into engineering, I wanted to work with water, and that's why I went to MCD. When that opportunity arose, I could work with water more closely.
Stephanie Goff, Greene County engineer. Still a resident here in Fairborn, and actually used to be city engineer here also. You're going to see all three of us. Kind of a little reunion here, but we still work together a lot. So oversee the stormwater for outside the municipalities for the county and also for the townships.
Hi, Manuel Jacobs, I'm the current Fairborn City Engineer. And yeah, as city engineer, my responsibility is to maintain and improve the city's right-of-way, and for that include all the stormwater and water quality structures that we, put in our projects. And we also do all the review for subdivisions, the commercial development, anything that has a potential negative impact to drainage and flow and stormwater. We take a look at it and we make sure that everything, meets regulations and before we can approve it.
John Bird, Clark County Engineer. It's the same thing Stephanie does, just one county north. Again, we review the subdivisions and maintain, I've got 309 miles of road and 240 bridges, and review the subdivision stormwater and all the development stormwater for Clark County.
Very good. All right, thank you. Thank you, folks. I wonder if I could toss it right away to my old colleague Don O'Connor, because I have some inside information with the large precipitation network that Miami Conservancy District maintains in Southwest Ohio. And I know we've seen some significant changes there, and I'm wondering if Don can give a little nutshell of that.
Yeah, and I guess I should have in an introduction talk a little bit about what Miami Conservancy District does, but like we say, we're all about water. We started as a flood protection organization. We have 5 large dry dams, 55 miles of levees along the Great Miami River, protect against catastrophic flooding there. But since then, and also from the beginning, we've been a water data agency. We've collected precipitation data, data on surface water quantity and quality, groundwater quality and quantity. So we've been doing, so we have over 100 years now of water data. And we do get into some other things, recreation and, that's it really, recreation and then our water data side. So on the precipitation and what we've seen with storms, so with over 100 years of data consistently collected at the same locations, we've been able to see some patterns, and specifically in precipitation. And there's one chart in particular, and I'm sure it's on our website, but it shows the running 30-year average annual precipitation in the Great Miami River watershed, all throughout the watershed. And from the early 1900s through 1950, 1960, 1970, it's relatively flat, a little bit of ups and downs, but starting, I believe, around 1980, if I remember right, it really starts going up drastically. And it's been, that pattern has not leveled off at all. So we're seeing overall more precipitation, and then the pattern we're seeing in types of storms, there's a change, it seems to be a change in types of storms. Again, it's with data, what can you say from 10 to 20 to 30 years? We always want more data before we can say for sure this is definitely different. But there seems to be more concentrated storms with higher, so maybe not watershed wide, but we'll get 2, 3, 4 inches in an hour or two in, one part of the watershed. A great example of that was when I-70 flooded over just east of Huber Heights, I think, a couple years ago. So anyway, that we are seeing that trend. That's really one of those clear trends that we're seeing with precipitation.
I see a lot of heads nodding down here from the county engineers, like, yep, we noticed that too.
It's isolated even within the county. I mean,
Yes.
we may even have, it could be northwest. We had a couple earlier this spring, and they got it 2 or 3 times. And the northwest part of the county just get 3, 4 inches of rain, and like you said, a matter of an hour or two. And the rest of the county may get an inch, but pretty quick when the phone starts ringing where it came through at, because there's water running places that usually doesn't run, so.
Yeah, I think that's probably true in a lot of parts of Ohio. My sister's road in Northwest Ohio, the county engineer actually put up a gate that they close. They close the county road because it's low and it's gonna go under, and they just, rather than have a fence in the back of the truck, they just close the gate. So,
How is this affected by the increased development in the area too, or is flooding exacerbated by that?
Well, I mean, I was talking specifically about or precipitation, so before it even hits the ground, there are definitely factors when it hits the ground. But it's hard, I hesitate to make a broad statement about that. And there's a lot with regulations, and different communities have different regulations, and different areas of different histories. And, some are older and they have a lot of impervious areas. But that's complicated, I guess,
Right.
to give a broad answer to, but.
I don't think you can put it on development per se. For example, we've had, in the last year, we've had, I think, 3 events that have hit Jamestown, where they literally have gotten 2 or 3 inches of rain in a half hour, 45 minutes, and the rest of the county got nothing. And that's not an area that's had any new development in a long time, and they would just get dumped on, and we'd have flooding complaints coming from that area, and like I said, the rest of the county did nothing. We didn't even know it had rained until we got the complaints. And then you'll get another part of the county another time, and it just kind of, they're like these just microbursts where they just come over and dump, and then they're gone. That's what we see a lot more of, but.
And some of this in the older developments especially. I mean, I was in private practice for 20 years before I did this. And one of the things we would do when you do a development is plug the drains in your mind and look where the water goes. So if that drain plugs, okay, it's gonna run down the street for 15 minutes, half hour, and escape, and have a flood route. A lot of the older ones do not have what I call a flood route. So you're in a bowl with a pipe with a catch basin. You get one of these deluges, hit that, and that pipe plugs, or it just won't handle that rain, then you're gonna have concentrated flooding at that point, because the overflow, everything's in the bowl. The drain's right in the center to simplify things, and if that storm's not sized for that, that area's gonna flood. Just an area of flooding. It's not floodplain, it's just flooding in the area where, current regulations, what we try to do and look at is make sure and see that there is flood routing. If all those storm inlets plug, route it someplace where it's not going into somebody's house or, wherever else. Have it run down the right of way in between houses, wherever, but come up with a flood route for that, if that makes sense to you.
Well, I just remember once, years ago, that I lived in, around Kettering, Oakwood area, and I was driving down Dorothy Lane, and then I turned on, I think that's South Dixie, or Kettering Boulevard, and it rained. It was, as you talk about, a microburst on that. And we were, all of a sudden, stuck in a flash flood. I mean, I couldn't believe there was 10 inches of water in this place I've been driving for decades. But then I realized they had done a lot of, around Snyder Brick, they had done a lot of, they had taken out a lot of wetlands area and developed. And I just always wondered, was there a connection with this, how the microburst responds to, the whole area?
The newer development, I mean, I'm sure Stephanie, you guys have stormwater regulations and everything else where they're all routed, and you guys too, through the detention basins and so forth. So your newer developments can handle that, but the older developments do not, because the regulations weren't there. They just kept, this subdivision comes in and build it, and then they put this pipe in here, well, then this one builds, and they put this pipe. The trouble is, eventually, the capacity of the pipes won't handle that because there's no control of the stormwater. So with the regulations we have now, there is more control of the stormwater.
And also, we're seeing from what you're talking about, the more precipitation we're seeing too, the standards that we have, what we were designed for, we can't design for every event. We only design for certain years of storm events. And sometimes we're seeing that it feels like more frequently of those larger events that our pipes aren't sized for, or in the older developments too. A lot of times we're ending up with, over time, People are filling in ditches, people are putting in sheds, people are
Yeah.
taking out some stuff, they don't even know they're doing it a lot of times, that they're taking away where some of that storage is or blocking some of those drainage ways that are supposed to be there.
Enclosing ditches with a pipe.
Yes, which is.
The ditch
you know,
carries way
well,
more water than the pipe does. So we start enclosing those.
Don, I've been using your chart for the past several years that you mentioned. It's so valuable. That's one of the most, people pay more attention to that slide. Where they see the XY axis and the arc going northeast, it's undeniable. My question for you, Don, is in all the data you have, you've been hearing about microbursts, I call them rain bombs. Is there any way to mine out the frequency of those rain bombs? If you chose a figure like 3 inches or more in an hour, is there any way for us to get at hard data for rain bombs / microbursts? MCD has a lot of academic standing, so if you could produce data like you do on that chart, that would be important.
My first reaction is that yes, that would definitely be possible. Just thinking about the number of rain gauges that MCD is a part of, some of them we own, it's, but it's a network throughout the whole Great Miami watershed that we have all that data. But then on top of that, USGS and National Weather Service and NOAA, there's so much data with precipitation, and I'm sure the data, if my colleague Mike was here, he'd say, well, we'd love to have twice as many rain gauges. You can get more specific on those. I think mining that data and going through the process to find that answer to that specific question might be difficult. I can't say for sure because it's not my area of expertise, but I would think the data is there that we could answer that question pretty closely.
I think the man who produced that XY graph was Mike somebody.
Yeah, Mike Eckberg.
Yeah, Mike, that's it,
Yes.
that's it.
Did
So-
he retire?
No, he's still there.
Okay.
Yeah, he's not allowed to retire either. We've had enough of these retirements going.
So I'll be glad to contact him. I think I've got his number still,
Okay.
but could you say something to him? Because I think the
Yeah.
public is really interested in knowing if we have hard data to show that frequency of those events
Yeah, definitely.
is increasing.
I'll make a note here to talk to him about that. Yeah.
But the problem is that it's still such a small-scale event, it's not uniform. I think the city of Springfield operates 7 or 8 gauges where they would have that data because it's over time. But for any one of those gauges to catch an event like they're talking about is really by luck. You need a higher density of gauges to really.
I'm not looking for, like, there's a 3-inch, a 3.5, a 4. What I think is valuable is to be able to say in quantitative numbers, in the Great Miami watershed, we can say, based on our data collection, that there are approximately this many events on an annual basis. I mean, that's, when you go out and talk to people and you say these microburst rain bombs are happening more frequently, the first thing somebody might say is, well, prove it to me, show me the data, okay? There's gotta be general data with numerical frequency, not saying, trying to get at what a specific neighborhood might be impacted by, but there's gotta be data that tells us whether it's running above
Sure.
average or.
And I'm only suggesting that we might not be catching all of them.
Yeah, oh yeah,
But it would give you a minimum, yeah.
we need that. Those of us who are out there working for watershed awareness, we need that.
I don't know if National Weather
That's what I was
Service, they
wondering,
do
too.
that radar estimated rainfall, which would be dependent on a limited number
Right.
of rain gauges. But when they show it, like on the news, they show the estimated rainfall. I don't know if they have that historical data where you could see that pop up.
They haven't put it up as far as I can find out. You can find out in retrospect, like if you had a big event yesterday or a week ago or a year ago.
But not historic.
Yeah, but
I bet they've got it somewhere.
we
Probably do.
need something like Mike's producing.
Okay.
Because like the
I can ask.
software we use for with SWIP track.
Yeah.
I mean, we know how much estimated happens at a particular site based on radar indications, so I would think they would have that data, it's whether they were compiling it in that form or fashion and saving it.
Yeah, I don't know if they would have an
Right.
easy to use form or not, but I bet
Yeah.
they would have that data.
And Angela, I hope we're not diverting the discussion
No,
too much for when you plan to open up for questions.
that's fine.
I would be interested to think about, as Dawn was indicating, not just microbursts, but there's a general pattern of greater rainfall. And we've seen this in other areas of the world. We've been pretty safe around here. We haven't had catastrophic incidents. Other places in the world have, but the climate is changing. So what I would like to get to is what Stephanie was saying. You guys are planning based upon historical data, and that data is changing. You said that. So when is it that in your profession you start using different data? When is it that you say, in other words, let's be proactive and not be reactive? If the climate is changing, we better figure this out now.
They're already working at it on a national level.
Yeah.
Disaster preparedness.
Well, that, and we had a presentation, was it last year at the Stormwater Conference about that? We heard from the National Weather Service and another organization that they already are studying that and showed some of the same trends you were talking about with the precipitation, and that, looking at adjusting some of those design standards,
Let's
based
look
on
at
what
that
we're
too.
seeing.
So I'll just try to extend it again. When does that impact your job? When do you start changing your estimations? You're based upon what something the federal government's going to tell you at some
Well, we have
point?
standards we have to follow.
That we have, yeah. We can't just make that up.
Right.
No,
And those come
I
from,
think he's asking, when are you guys gonna need to change your standards?
Yeah.
For sizing volume.
Well, that's what we're saying. The people above us that develop those standards, they're currently reviewing those and working on updating those. And those are the standards we have to use in our industry. Those are the ones we're required to use, so.
But that does happen slowly because they use 30-year normals.
Right.
And they don't update every year. They use these 30-year chunks, so it's an average over the past 30 years as opposed to the last 10 or 5 even for that event on 70. I mean, that was the first, in my mind, first big event in this region that we had to contend with.
And John, perhaps build on the dams that you oversee was a vision by Arthur Morgan a century ago. When is it that we, as citizens of the Miami Valley, that catastrophic event that they were designed to withstand or prevent, when do we get concerned, well, they may not be enough?
yeah, so, you could have, I think until maybe the first 70, 80, or 80 years of the system, you could have argued and had a pretty good chance of winning the argument that our system is over-designed. So the 19, is a quick number exercise here, to help you understand the scale. The normal flow in the Great Miami River through downtown Dayton is about 2,000 cubic feet per second. The largest flood in the 1800s, estimated, was about 120,000 cubic feet per second. The 1913 flood was 250,000 cubic feet per second. So that was an outlier of a flood from the 200 years where we have some kind of record, some kind of idea of size of storms and floods. Our system is designed for 1913, that 250,000 plus 40% bigger. So of our 5 dams, in all of this 100+ years that it's been here, the most that one of our reservoirs has filled up is about 31%. And that's at one dam. The other dams, might have been 15 to 20% of the time. So we have a lot of storage capacity left. We're really over-designed, but now as precipitation increases, we're one of the few systems around the country that can say we have a lot of extra storage and protection built in. But there's something now called the probable maximum flood that terminology and idea did not exist, really until the last couple decades. But our dams can, as we understand now, can safely pass that. That storm is bigger than what we're designed for. that's envisioned as the largest possible flood that can happen in a region. But it's close to the top of our dams. But these are projections, there's a lot of uncertainty with those. But we feel confident, really confident, especially if we compare ourselves to other areas around the country, that our system, we have room for at least this precipitation increase that we're seeing right now.
Can I ask you a question about the Huffman Dam? VW Greenway, the Mad River flows through it, and we've been trying to preserve the riparian areas, and have been doing some. But the erosion is still eventually filling up the bottom of that Huffman Dam. Has there been any noticeable increase, or do you measure the sediment level or whatever, in a situation like that?
Yeah, and this is a good question. We've been talking about that a lot recently. Right shortly after the dams were built, there were some sediment traps that were installed at the upstream side of the dams to try to get an idea of how much sediment drops out in events, and do we have to worry about it? Is it something we have to measure over time? I don't know how long those were in place, but the engineers at the time determined that it was not worth tracking. It was so little sediment that drops out. Now, it's noticeable that, if you dig there, and there is more sediment on the ground from all of these water storage events. But one reason that more sediment doesn't drop out is because the dams drain so fast. So the water's not sitting there that long. There's worse sediment deposition issues on permanent pool dams, where the stormwater comes in, and then that sediment is trapped behind the dam. A lot of our sediment ends up still going through, not all dropping out of the water, still going through the conduits. But new technology now, we have LiDAR and aerial survey technology that we can survey the whole storage basin and see how much storage is available. So we did that, I think, within the last 10 years, I think. Maybe it was, maybe 2012, 2014. We did LiDAR and analyzed it and calculated how much storage we have in our dams. And overall, we have about 2% more storage than we need. So even with the sediment deposition of 100 years, we still have a little bit more storage than what we designed for originally. But now we can watch it a lot easier with that LiDAR data. So that's kind of the way we're keeping track of it now.
I want to take a moment, step back a little bit, and make sure we're all talking the same language. Leanne and I have been in this business for long enough to know that it's pretty easy to find somebody in any audience who's not sure what we mean when we say the word watershed. Leanne, would you be able to explain that to the crowd?
I sure would. A watershed is an area of land that drains water, basically. It's a basin defined by higher elevation down to lower elevation. A lot of the typical pictures that try to describe this show a mountain that goes down to a river valley and all that. But here in Ohio, it could be, excuse me, like the Great Miami River watershed, where it's in between, like, I don't know, the bordering cities, but it's not exactly what you might think it is, because you can't always see where the highest elevation is. But basically, it all drains down to the Great Miami River. So.
Yeah, we're pretty close here. I think that, like, Fairborn, Beaver Creek area, part of it goes to the Great Miami, part of it goes to Little Miami, and you don't feel like you're on a big ridge.
And then we have the Mad River. The Mad River, excuse me, Buried Valley Aquifer as well, and they're some of the best in the world. We're very lucky to have them.
Yeah, I think Bob was sharing with me that this building might be right on the ridge. Like, if you go out the front door, you're in the Mad River watershed, and if you go out the back door, you're in the Beaver Creek, probably, watershed.
And you can't even tell. That's what I was trying to say, There's never a mountain, there's not always a mountain to tell you, okay, this is the start, and way down there is fine.
And I think it's pretty common, too. The other thing that's surprising to me is that even though we see those photographs or those drawings of the ridge and the mountains, and you're going this way, you kind of get it when you're in Colorado, but here it doesn't really look like that. But in fact, these headwater areas are tending to be more wetland-y, right? Like more marshy and more flat and more It's just surprising, you know, in a logical way. You think, okay, yeah, sure, I get wetlands are gonna be along a river because there's a big floodplain and whatnot, but when it's, can you explain that to me, Dr. Ritter? Why, do you know why that is?
Well,
In Ohio anyway?
yeah, as you get towards the main stem, of course, everything drops with that river, so you get higher relief. Up in these headwater areas, because of glaciation, it's fairly flat. So you just don't have, I mean, when you're right near the divide, there's not enough runoff to really create erosion. And so you don't have the relief that promotes the drainage development, that promotes the drainage of the land itself. You've got very little erosion in those upland areas, so if they're flat to begin with, and they are because of glaciation, they tend to stay flat. You need a certain volume or a certain discharge of water to actually erode the channel itself, so until you're doing that whole scale, and that's usually downstream, you maintain these upland wetlands, and we're rich in them.
Yeah, I can name a dozen or more small Huck 12 watersheds that are that way, you know, with the flat wetland areas in the upstream. So it's very interesting. Okay, I wonder, I think we've heard a little bit about flooding, but I wonder if there's anyone here who could tell us what water-related complaints you get the most in your office, maybe.
Generally flooding backyards. You know, we get a lot of that, especially in areas where we have a fair amount of housing in the older parts of the town that were built right against streams. We got houses along Hebel Creek, we got Redback Ditch, we got a couple of areas where there's a lot of there's a lot of housing, there's a lot of, build out in the region. They're right against the stream, so anytime we get a big flooding event or a big storm, they're the ones directly impacted because their property is on the ditch line. So we've been trying to work and evaluate and assess how do we kind of improve the situation. We've been trying to utilize stormwater control upstream, try to kind of minimize the impact from the stormwater event. You kind of have an idea of how Fairborn flows kind of north to south. We got the areas right here in the Rona with Hebel Creek. Everything kind of starts flowing south, southwest, and trying to basically catch the stormwater before it gets to the areas that really impacts it. That's one of the things that we try to do. The only other thing that we try to inform, is the word I want to use for this, is I think Dawn mentioned it earlier, and I think it's really important when you're talking about stormwater in your own home. It's really important to not think of it as just your home. You're connected, whether you want it or not, to this watershed network, and water's gonna come in from one side of your house and of your property, and it's gonna go to the other. So there's a lot of swales, there's a lot of ditches, especially you see it now more prominently on newer subdivisions. They have a lot of swales in the backyards. They have a lot of dedicated areas where the stormwater is meant to go. If the catch basins flood, if there's the flood trails, he mentioned, these areas are designed, these backyards are generally designed to account for water. So every now and then we'll get a call, it's like, my backyard's flooding, and I'm like, yes, that is by design. The water is, going across it and going into the outfall that it's required to. So it's really important to keep that in mind. And more importantly, like that, as a homeowner, it's really important for you to maintain that. So anytime you start seeing somebody building a shed or building a pool or building something that impacts it, you got to keep in mind where the stormwater is going and where it's coming from. So that's the one thing I can do, to try to assist for them. You got to be cognizant of where the stormwater is coming from or where it's going, and how your house and how your property is part of that network. So, like going back to that Hebel Creek area, it's an old part of town, and you try to, if you're in Central or Xenia or one of the streets that you can kind of look across the backyards, you see a lot of build out. You have people, you have homes that have built bridges that contact the channel. You have people that have little ridges and retaining walls, and you gotta keep in mind you're part of a network, and everything you do that slow and reduce the flow of the water it's gonna impact everybody upstream and impact everybody downstream too as well, so.
And that can be a positive impact downstream. I mean, and the, specifically, that Hebel Creek area, oh no, is it Rona? What's the neighborhood where we have, there's hardly any, there's not enough catch basins, and you'll get whole intersections flooded.
Oh, yeah,
And
it's
it'll
in the
be-
north side, just east of Broad, it's,
Yeah, I'm trying to put, but it's that, there's a lot of, like, from World War II on, like 40s through the 70s subdivisions that didn't have the stormwater regulations. Your streets flooded, and it might be that way, and this in particular is mainly in the streets. I'm not sure of the effect it had on basements, and, you know, there can be, what's that?
Midman Park.
Yes, thank you. So there's water standing in the street in your neighborhood. That is helping downstream because it's acting as detention in the street. You know, now we design neighborhoods like Manuel was talking about, the ones that are designed now are much more, there's much more time spent on it. You have the detention basins to help store that water and release it slowly. And that's the same thing happening in the street there. So if you designed it all piped, which a certain area of subdivisions did that without detention, we're getting it out of the neighborhoods, off our streets and properties as fast as we can. That's when it's causing problems downstream. So we're in a much better spot now where we're designing the subdivision development than we were in the past. But that's not to say we can't do better or that there's always improvements we can make.
I think residents can help with that as well, like different features in their yard. And then there's gray infrastructure versus green infrastructure. Green infrastructure also introduces the concept of ecological services for free that nature can do for us. You know, like filtering water, instead of devegetating your grass swale in front of your house, just stripping all the grass out of it, and making it bare dirt, which contributes to water pollution. You can keep it vegetated, and then you can maybe use it to drop out some sediment, and then grow grass on top of it. Or rain gardens are another example of green infrastructure. They have to be sized. You'll have to get information from the county and permission and all that sort of thing, but those are another way that a citizen can help the county or the township. And if they have an area that is flooding in their yard, maybe there's more they could be doing to help with slowing the water down, let it percolate down into the soil like it's naturally supposed to do. And to your point, Nancy, I think that anytime you have a hard surface, that's where stormwater pollution happens. Rain is supposed to percolate down through soil. That's nature's way of doing things. And when it's, we need to build homes and roads and that sort of thing, we have to have a place to live. So there's a difficult balance. But sometimes we can help help Mother Nature in mimicking her natural design to the best of our abilities, because no offense, but Mother Nature's the only perfect engineer I'm aware of.
We can't control her.
There's no controlling her, absolutely not.
Yeah, I think what's really interesting too, this is just a digression, and you all know Don Geiger, he died in 2020, I think, or, he was brilliant if you knew him at all. But I think one of the things that a lot of us learned, because we were involved in the native plant movement, and so it was totally native plant, but then at Zimmerman Prairie, we would go and hack out the gray dogwood. And that's one of the things that I learned, that gray dogwood really sucks up the water and changes the, I mean, that just blew our minds. We thought, what is it? It's a whole lot more complex than we thought.
Well, it wasn't so long ago, and I'm not exactly sure when it was, that they actually have put a monetary value to ecological services, especially when it comes down to stormwater retention with trees and their inclusion. I think it might have been, it wasn't Davies. Was it a private contractor that did that, or was it? It could have been the Division of Forestry, but I am leaning towards, it could have been a private contractor. But they have been able to, it's more than a guesstimate on if you have this size of species of tree in this area of your watershed, and you're trying to calculate your volume, And then you also have to include your water quality on top of that, filtration system. These types of trees can help you attain this percentage. So they can, they have been able to do that. So, they have made a lot of advances. I mean, and the connection, circling back to the point I was trying to make earlier on, the citizens, I'm gonna call it power, to participate, in your own water quality, in your own backyard. There are so many things that everybody could really be doing. So, I mean, just like you were talking about, native prairie flowers, not only are we dealing with, volume, I don't know if there's an estimation on volume for, native prairie flowers or not for their uptake of stormwater, but their ability to slow down and also the ability to pollinate, which helps our pollinators. So there's a whole connection of things. So, anyway, I don't know if I fine-tuned my point on that or not, but for what it's worth, I'll just put it like that.
I'd like to go back to Manuel's
Yeah.
statement that said, you said that you try to stop the stormwater before it gets to those risky areas.
Yeah.
So what are those strategies that you're using to collect that before it gets there? Is that back to Leanne's points of?
No, we have two actual improvements that we've been implementing this year. So, and this is, I think, before anyone at the table, we had, and by we, I mean the city of Fairborn had Hidden Hills wetland just north of here, basically built out. The intent of it was to help and collect stormwater from the Rona Hills area, and it has sluice gate, and its whole intent was to collect stormwater and regulate it before it goes further south into the Hevel Creek. That, as far as we could find any record of, was never utilized. It was installed, the gate was in place, and it was left fully open. The whole thought of it was during big rain events, staff would go in, close it, hold water, let it drain or percolate or infiltrate, and then they would open back up. Whether it was inexperience or just lack of motivation or just whatever reason, it was just genuinely never used once in 20, 30 years, or probably however long it's been since it was installed. We've made changes to that as of this year. We've closed it to a certain level. We've made improvements to the channel for it. We got some new rock and improvements to the stream itself, because not only did the head wall was inadequate, even though when we had some really bad flooding events, it would flood to the east where those houses are. So we built up that east side of the channel to make sure that all the stormwater is now going to the west. It's actually, like, if you ever had a chance to look it up, our street and water department did a fantastic job cleaning that up and kind of redefining it. So that's one of the things we're implemented and we have put in place. The other one we're looking at is the Rona Parks. It's just another area we're evaluating for future use. That one also is meant where the soccer fields are, just north of here. That whole area was also built and designed to be used for controlling stormwater and holding big rain events. And again, it's never been used. It's got emergency spillway, it's got concrete channel, it's got the whole mechanics in place to be used for it. It's just had never been used. So it's one of the things with the soccer fields being there that we're evaluating for future use if it comes to that. But right now, we're just leaving it as it is while taking the opportunity to make some improvements of it. So those are just some of the small things we have implemented and worked towards this year to help actually contain stormwater before it hits further south.
DW Greenway has been attempting to increase this greenway, as the term implies, around the Beaver Creek, increasing wetlands that we understand historically were there but have been drained. Do you see a municipal or county support for that system? Is that on your radar? Whoever wants to refer to that, Greene County or Clark County even?
We're seeing a little bit, nothing the ground is so expensive right now, we're not seeing a whole lot of that being done. Trying to incorporate other stuff with some developments, we've had them upsize some of their basins, just because it made logistics sense. But as far as wetlands, I mean, you're seeing you don't see those much in development. They don't understand the benefit of them. I mean, we do the water quality in addition to the stormwater, but, you know, a lot of your wetlands are better at removing the pollutants. I'm probably jumping ahead, so you can stop me if you want, but also incorporate in with your stormwater design. You have the first flush. Essentially, that's when it hits your asphalt, so all your contaminants that's on your parking lot comes off, and we actually have to contain that, and that is regulated through a slow flow device. I'm talking, you know, you may have a 12-inch pipe draining out, but realistically. What's that?
And going out this size.
Yeah. And I've seen them where they're an inch or two. And the goal is to leave that water sit there for the, you know, pollutants to settle out. You know, the grass does a decent job at that, but I haven't seen any developers really grasp like putting a wetland in. If you're talking small scale stuff like that, I've not seen them want to do that. The data shows that this works the first flush, because most of your contaminants, as they come off your parking lot, it's gonna be that first rain. And it's the more frequent rains, you know, it sits there for a week or two, cars drip oil, whatever the contaminant is, and you get that, maybe it's only half-inch rain. Well, that's fine, because that goes down into that system, and pretty much that entire rain is gonna be trapped in the bottom of that basin and sit there and filter out through 1, 2 inch, depending on the size of the development, I mean, and try to take those out. So, and that's one of the other things we have to do in addition to the stormwater is the water quality concept, so.
Yeah, land is definitely at a prime as far as value right now when it comes to developers. We're not necessarily seeing developers take out wetlands,
Right.
per se. We're not seeing that really happen. They're setting them aside if they're there, but they're definitely not building any new ones either. But what BW Green, you guys are doing is a benefit to our region. It does truly help recharge our aquifers, really helps deal with the water quality issues of existing and everything else. So what you guys are doing is the right thing to help try to save what we do have, from that perspective. And I mean, nature is the best filter, honestly. And we can do all the design we want on ponds, everything else, but nature is really gonna be the best to be able to deal with water quality.
So it seems like it's, on the whole, a social good, but it seems to me there has been developers along 675 here who have mitigated wetlands, who have destroyed wetlands through tiling or through development. And there's been some use of credits, where a developer purchases credits and then they build wetland elsewhere, like I know that they're doing it at old golf course in Montgomery County.
Is that still going on, or is that one done?
I'm not familiar.
I'm wondering, my
I think it's
question to the
still
panel
going
is,
on.
Which one is
is that a desirable strategy?
Old Large Tree Golf
I've heard
Course,
what you're talking about,
Trailblazer,
Tom, and I've questioned that myself,
Metro
because
Parks.
if they mitigate, if they destroy a wetland, they have, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong, but they have to, try to create a wetland that's equal quality and double this acreage in another area. But I definitely have mixed feelings on that, because it takes decades, if not longer, to create the types of soils that wetlands provide.
And that's part of the reason why I think the thought was doing the banks, instead of having developers do little baby ones in each one of their developments, was to take and concentrate those into one area. So you've got a larger area that actually is an effective wetland.
Yeah,
that you
but
can
the
do.
success
I said, I don't
rate-
know if it truly works or not, but that's, I believe, what the intention was behind the wetlands bank.
I mean, because we talked about headwaters earlier, and we talked about the flatter, wetlands that are up in the headwaters, and that, they form there for a reason. And there's an ecology there that has formed around that for a reason. And there's a, if we just uproot that and then we try to transfer all that, ecological services down to another area that no longer benefits its original site, I mean, it formed there for a reason. I don't know what kind of success rate that could possibly have. Because if you have, how long does it take to make a wetland naturally? How long does it take, wait, let me rephrase. How long does it take Mother Nature to make a wetland? I am not aware.
It takes 10,000 years to do 3 feet of peat.
So, I have mixed emotions personally and professionally on that, because, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think, you heard, the talk about developers, and I think one thing that our communities can do, and we see this in how all of us, everyday citizens, can affect the communities we live in, is to be involved with your local government, with your council people, with your planning boards, and set the expectations, take control of the expectations of your community. A lot of communities let developers take control, and that economic development, right, is bringing money into the community, and the developers that I've worked with have been, especially taking, green space and developing it. I frankly haven't seen a lot of creativity or environmental thought. I think it's getting better, but it feels like it's really slow. And there was a lot of doing the things we've always done, and let's put in a pond, a retention pond with a fountain. And if the community says wetlands are very important to us, and we don't want any wetlands areas developed, even if there's a banking opportunity, and that would mean saying no to developers and to turning developers away and being more choosy. But I think that starts with the community and with the leadership, and talking to the leadership of the community, and be like, we're okay with not growing here. We're okay with this type of development not being here because we prioritize keeping this wetland or keeping this area natural.
Only if it comes down to a vote, and from my experience. Other than that, you can show up to meetings and your presence has power. But I think a lot of times, citizens, it comes down to the letter of the law oftentimes, but,
So I just want to add to the wetland discussion. Last year, House Bill 175 passed, signed by the governor. Even though that was the loss of ephemeral streams, loss of protection, nothing has to be mitigated now. Land that has ephemeral streams can be developed. If you haven't seen the effect of it yet on your highways, Stephanie, you already know.
We know it's
You're
coming.
gonna see it.
Yes.
Okay, we're talking about tens of thousands of acres that are now up
And
for development. And the public was not engaged enough in that fight.
And keep in mind, part of that was through the court system too, so.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, we lost a huge amount of wetlands. You can, not meaning the permanent wetlands, but the ability of the land to provide buffering during heavy flow situations.
You want to fill in the crowd, or I can, one or the other, as far as what that truly did?
Well, it went through the whole process. It was a House bill, then passed by the House committee, then this is the Ag and Natural Resources. Then it went to the Senate. There were some minor changes made in it because one of the Senate members or House member was a member of Ducks Unlimited, and Ducks Unlimited wrote him a nasty gram and said, how can you be a member and do this or something? It's all anecdotal. But basically, ephemeral streams, if they have intermittent flow, lost all protection, don't have to be mitigated anymore in the state of Ohio. So all of that land is now up for grabs for development. So that horse has already left the barn, but I only bring it up to reinforce the point. If there's not an overwhelming response from the community, members of the community, sportsmen's association, bird watchers, people who count on those things, we lose them. And that's what happened at HB 175 last year.
well, in a time when there are fewer and fewer volunteers across the board on any organization that's nonprofit. It's becoming less and less.
Yeah.
I mean, faith-based, nonprofit.
Sorry, there was a question in the back I wanted to address before we get too far.
Well, I need to tweak it in light of the recent discussion, but, so it used to be Corps of Engineers had jurisdiction over jurisdictional wetlands, which were, 5 acres or more? So who within the state of Ohio is responsible for regulating wetlands? Is it within ODNR? Is it within?
Corps still
Yeah,
does.
Corps still, yeah.
I'm sorry?
Corps still does. Army Corps still does,
Yeah.
Even
yes.
non-jurisdictional?
Yeah, they still have jurisdiction, correct?
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
But what did change recently with the court ruling on the wetlands was whether it connects or not. That was the recent court ruling that came down of whether it truly connects or not, and if it does not connect, then that took away some of their authority. And that just happened in the last 4 months.
Isolated
It was- yeah, it was
wetlands are
recent.
no longer covered under this significant nexus concept. So this is the waters of the US.
Right.
So besides HB 75 in Ohio, now we've got
Correct.
the significant nexus has been thrown out in the waters of the
And
US.
if those are things you feel strongly about, you need to tell your legislators, because that's where it comes from. We weren't the ones that overrode this. It was our legislators, so, and the departments that they oversee, so.
Right, my point was, it's all about, I mean, no one's gonna budge until there is a compliance issue associated with it. So that's why I was asking,
Right.
who's got the oversight from a regulatory
Yeah,
compliance?
from a
standpoint
wetlands,
for these
it's the Army
smaller,
Corps.
You know, because the Corps won't mess with anything under 5 acres, even if it's in their jurisdiction.
We don't have the authority to do anything with those, so,
Right.
yeah.
So it's like, to
EPA
whom should these concerns be addressed?
And that is Army Corps. Obviously, when a development is coming in, say a subdivision is coming in, they have to do the determination, everything else, they have to provide all that documentation to us. We're checking to make sure they are doing that process. If there are determinations or not, what those restrictions have been put on them, making sure those are implemented into their development plans, to make sure those areas are depicted out that they cannot construct in them, those type of things. Ultimately, Army Corps is still the one that would be overseeing that if there's an issue, but our job is kind of that oversight as developments are being designed and built, that they're being done in compliance with, so.
One of the things that, we have a wetlands group that meets quarterly from the Departments of Environment. And with regard to the, OEPA has their 401 permit that requires that. And they feel that even the Supreme Court decision isn't going to impact that, that we still will have EPA on isolated wetland.
Right.
But what we've been trying to work on is for jurisdictions, Fairborn County, whatever, if there's going to be hydric soils on a property, and you know, the 3 things for a wetland, hydric soil, vegetation, and water. If there's hydric soils to require a wetland determination as part of the application package for rezoning. And then if it does have a wetland determined, to have a wetland delineation as part of the site plan. And it doesn't even really need a zoning change as much as an administrative change. That in essence, when you get a package, what are you gonna ask for? And we have our soil maps been around
Right.
for 100 years. So the question of, as engineers, and there's a state engineers association and whatever, are there anything at that level where the Ohio county engineers would say, you know, we really prefer wetlands to detention ponds, we do this, that could then be used if, say, BW Greenway goes to the city of Fairborn and says, you know, not only, you know, we know by science it's the right thing to do,
Yeah.
but engineer community itself is saying, no, that it's a better solution, not just for maintenance, which is one of the problems, geese, you know, safety,
Yeah.
but it's just a natural solution. So that's where, even though you might say it's one level higher than we are, in a way, is that something you think the engineers, counties, the jurisdictional engineers could make a statement maybe that we could use when we go to Clark County or Greene County.
That's the last one.
Yeah, because and I am not, you know, I'm not the expert on this, so a lot of you know more about this than me. But I believe if a city or any government jurisdiction, a local government has subdivision regulations, I believe we can, you know, that community can make those stronger than what is required by the state or the federal. So you could require stream setbacks, and you could say if there's a wetland, you can't be, you know, within 75 feet of this wetland or whatever. And so I think that's possible. Now, there is, one thing I found when I was the city engineer for those 4 years was these developers are working in all these communities, right? And it was harder than I had hoped to, because if say Fairborn says, well, I'm gonna take this jump forward and I'm gonna make these big setbacks and these more restrictive things here, and developers throw, well, we're not gonna develop here, we're gonna go to the community next door, they don't have these restrictions. But it's possible, and if you get leadership is have the convictions that they wanna set the example and be the leader, I think it's possible, but I don't know, I feel more comfortable saying that now that I'm not a city engineer.
I can speak a little more to that. And he is correct. You know, like Stephanie said, we basically oversee and make sure that everything is compliant to state, federal regulations. But we can ask, and we have been asking a little more from developers moving forward. And Dawn said it, but what's really key for it, and where citizens really come in, is leadership. It really helps to have an environmentally focused council, an environmentally and conservative focused, conservation focused planning board to really push for these requirements, and for us, asking these developers to take the extra step. We have seen it this year on some commercial developments that we have coming down the line, where by regulation or by the existing layout, they were meant, they could have drained things in one direction that would have impacted the Hebel Creek. Planning board said, no, you're gonna drain everything south, we're gonna make some conditions to it, and the development was approved with conditions, that go above a step, above what they would otherwise be required, and developers saw that, meeting that condition didn't, financially or negatively impact them too much, then they said, okay, so it passed with conditions, and then council, same thing, followed it up and approved it with those conditions, and we're, holding them to it, and all their designs and everything they're putting forward now meets these additional conditions. So, but we can't force that on them. We can request it and we can push for it. But we've had instances in the past years ago where we could ask for it and they would say no, and then planning board and council, just yes, and moved it along. So having that voice, and I can speak for it for Fairborn, for the last 2 years, there has been a very, very increased focus in stormwater and detention in addressing these flooding issues. The city has given the engineering department a directive to kind of start tackling these issues in objective and material ways, and how we approve and how we see these upcoming new developments and commercial properties to take, these extra steps is coming directly from council. It's coming directly from the city manager. It's coming directly from the leadership to say, hold them to these standards, make them do more, or we won't approve them. And that's what I'm seeing now. So, and that has come directly from citizens speaking to them. We have various committees. We have people coming to council every time something is being developed and bringing issues about stormwater. We have residents coming and complaining about, we have flooding here. That is how we know where we need to focus. And council and planning board have been doing a fantastic job, I think, this year on really holding these developers, to a higher standard than we would otherwise see. But it really comes down from them, because if they were okay with nothing, then, you know, where I could request all they want, but as long as they meet and are compliant to all the regulations, I'm obligated to say, well, they do meet all the obligations, and that's all I can say.
I would say us on this table, we are probably typically get the branded of being not developer friendly.
Yeah.
Because we are holding the developers to the fire, everything else. And a lot of times the leadership above us is, no, you gotta work with the developer, everything else. We have a job as professional engineers that we hold our standard, and trust me, I take a hell of a lot of heat because I do stand the ground with the developers of, no, I'm not caving on it. But experience the same thing that you used to, and it's exciting to see that shift in Fairborn because it did not used to be that way. That we would put requirements on them out of the engineering department, out of the planning department, and we get overrode because they wanted the development.
And yeah, we're just starting, you know, it's been little things here and there, but it's definitely the direction the city has been moving towards, and there's definitely room for improvement, and we can definitely be more aggressive and start requesting more. But, you know, when it comes to these big infrastructure changes, this mindset, it's, you know, it takes time. We can't make big changes overnight. We have to basically take baby steps and just go little by little. And every time we bring something forward, every time we do a new improvement, we just try to do a little better than before.
I like your inclusion of planning boards. If there's citizen input, a lot of our jurisdictions have volunteer planning commissions
Yep.
or zoning appeals. Let's be involved with that. That's the way we can be a part of that.
They do have a lot of weight, you know, in terms of things being approved or denied, and they have been, you know, they ask. Every case has been asking about stormwater. Every case wants to know where it's going, what they're doing to make things better. It has been a very, very it's been a big priority for Fairborn, I would say, for about 2 years now, and I don't see it stopping anytime soon.
Can I ask
And a lot of it's proactive before you even see it as a planning board with us as staff working with the developer. I mean, we've seen some of these come in and utilize the existing wetlands, not tear them up. Okay, go on a little bit smaller houses. I mean, I'll support, you know, putting this on a smaller house and then open up this greenway and leave that and utilize that. So, but that's gonna be, that needs to be done before it gets to the plan board. Because when that comes to the plan board, you've got thousands and thousands of dollars in time invested in the plans, and that's what we do. At that point, we become staff. I mean, I don't know how it works in
Right,
Greene
yeah.
County. At that point, we're staff. And I've been called the worst county engineer to work with in the state of Ohio. I'm assuming you have too.
We must be tied for it
Yeah,
then.
and, you know, everyone, there's 88 of us, and I
Yeah.
think we've all been called the worst county engineer, I mean, according to them.
Yeah.
It's like, it's the regulations.
Right.
Well, I don't want to do that. Okay, then, bye. I mean, we've had those conversations, and those don't even go to the planning board. I mean, some of the other ones, but getting them up front,
And
kind of like
they-
working with your kids, you gotta kind of make them think it's their idea.
That's true.
And that is the best way of doing it.
Yes, you plan it.
It's not the easiest thing to do, but if you can steer them and make them think it's their idea, suddenly our job become much easier, and by the time it gets to the plan board, it goes even better for them. And if they realize that, you know, I'm here, I'm trying to help you. You are fighting me, and then you're gonna go to the plan board, I'm gonna tell them I don't approve of it. Bob, what are you guys gonna do when me or one of my guys go there and say, no, we're not doing it? You guys aren't gonna approve it, haven't been one yet, you guys have never overridden me when we've done that. But that's the whole key, get it up front before they envision whatever going right there where the wetland is, steer them and say, how about leaving that a green space and try to go with a little bit more? You can still get your X number of houses in on this property and do that more as green space, which you're seeing that more and more anyway
We are.
with the development.
And that's one thing too, is to get in, to just add on, then I'll jump to you, from the standpoint of, get involved in those comprehensive land use plans. Get involved in your zoning plans for your area, because those are the documents that are also guiding where your councils, where your planning boards, and where your trustees and city councils are going with those, because that is supposed to be the direction coming from you guys of how do you want land to be used? Where do you want your farmland? Where do you want your development? Where do you want to keep green? Those type of things. It needs to be in those documents because those are guides. They aren't enforceable documents per se, but those are guides of what do you guys want as a community. So like Greene County just finished updating our comp plan, the regional planning just ran. Honestly, we did not get a lot, we got some feedback from the public, but not as much as we would like to. We rarely get, on any type of those things, we don't get the public coming out and saying what we want. So that's what we need you guys to do, to be involved in that side, to set the groundwork of what do you guys want as a community? What do you want as a township? What do you want in your city? What do you want out on the rural area? Because that's what they need to hear from you.
And that allows you to,
Right.
earlier, right, earlier in the process, from the beginning,
Right.
here's this document, this is what we should follow.
Yeah, so if a developer walks in the door and says, we're wanting to develop this parcel, the planning commission, your trustees, the planning department for you guys are going, well, per the comprehensive plan or per the zoning, this area is not what our community wants to be done with this part of the county. So it becomes a harder fight for them to try to do something there because there already is a support of the community on it. Versus if it's already zoned that way and already commercial, comp planned that way, it's hard to say no. So, and I want to jump back to your question, I'm sorry.
Well,
Okay.
I'll build on for just a minute.
Okay.
I just want to add though, those are all citizen committees, so, I mean, the comprehensive planning, whether you live in the township or municipality or working on a county level, those are all citizen committees. They may hire consultants, but the way it's designed is the citizens are supposed to
Get the
guide
feedback.
the consultants, basically.
Yes.
So all of those, your local zoning committee, you've got a chance to be on there. It may take you a few years to get on there,
But a lot of those, when we were doing the feedback, it was a year worth of trying to collect feedback from the community and holding events all over the county, at libraries, you name it, different events, even during COVID, they were out on the master trail plan, heck, we were out on the bike path trying to get feedback from people, any ways we can on the internet, you name it, trying to get feedback from the public of what you guys want and how you want things to change.
Even if you're not on the committee.
Right, even
I
if
mean,
you're not in the committee,
those-
any John Q. Public can give their feedback on that,
And you do it and set it up and two people show up.
yeah.
it
But we
does- it
still
does
value the
matter.
opinion of
It
those
does,
two people.
yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, it's just sad that
It
you're
is.
dealing with thousands of people and two people show up, but.
I wonder about your opinions on these detention ponds, because one of your strategies, when there's a development, you require detention ponds. I'm wondering, what are the benefits and maybe are there downsides to detention ponds? Are those appropriate?
So I guess I'll clarify a little bit. We give them, in our guidance and everything else, they have multiple tools they can use to deal with water quality and water quantity, such as detention basins, retention basins, rain gardens. Dry wells. A lot of different options are available to them. In general, right now, that's what your developers are choosing to do for a couple of reasons. One, they need the dirt to build their sites, because all the good sites are gone, so they need the dirt. That's a lot of it, and it's honestly one of the cheapest to build when it comes to building the solution, so that's what they're choosing to do. It's just one of the tools in the toolbox they have available. They have other tools available. And sometimes we'll see, we've got a development, we got two developments that just did dry wells, on a commercial side of it. And because they're down near US 35, down near the Beaver Creek Township area, we have the soils and the pit run and everything down there they can do, because all the aggregate places down there. So we can do storage that way, or it's infiltrating down dry wells, because we can't even hold water down there. If you're familiar with Beaver Creek, schools, they're on Dayton Xenia. We've never seen water in those ponds ever. There's just depressions there, there's dry wells under those.
Yeah.
But it's all grass. It's not actually, never holds water ever. I don't think anybody has any history of actually seeing water sitting them.
They're deep,
Yeah.
I actually helped see.
Yeah, you run
Yeah,
that
I
one
was
too.
inspection
Yeah,
on it,
yeah.
yeah.
So- and-
Yeah, they're like 25, 27, they're deep dry wells. Yeah, that entire school has no connection, no storm water, and no outflow whatsoever. Everything is contained on the site.
So is it the panel's opinion that those are useful strategies?
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I have a few strong thoughts on this, but, ourselves and I was happy to hear from our safety forces, and when I was at Fairborn, that they do not like what we call retention ponds, so it's holding permanent pool of water, a permanent pond. It's a safety hazard in the winter, and I just don't, I don't see it as a great use of land. I much prefer a dry detention pond where you can, and a shallow, there's these developments where the community green space in the park playground will be in the detention, a shallow detention pond or area, I wouldn't even call it a pond, because, and then it might fill up with water occasionally, but you're not flooding houses, and it's more usable space. And right next door here, Waterford Landing, right? All right, I didn't forget that name yet. But you talked earlier about trees, and some of the best land use to prevent flooding is wetlands or forest, natural forested land. Agricultural land's not great at it, especially with our rain patterns here. Most of our most threatening flood events are in the winter to spring when there's no crops on the field. So, and the 1913 flood happened when the entire watershed was frozen. It's starting to thaw ground, but saturated by a few weeks of intermittent rain before the big event came. So there was no water soaking into the ground. It was almost like the whole 4,000 square mile watershed was paved with asphalt. So this was agricultural land, and then you see that turned into the subdivision with these roofs and these streets. Ideally the case is, and it might be the case here, that with the design of the storm system and the detention ponds here, that there is less runoff in most storms than there is in the winters when there was, just agricultural land. So the details matter about the site. I mean, you mentioned Beaver Creek where, the soil there just takes the water and it goes down and becomes groundwater. So it's good that there's a toolbox and you can, and site specific.
And yes, Dawn mentioned it, it's really, I don't think we can really emphasize just how important soil is, and when it comes to infiltration, and when it comes to collecting stormwater, and what you can or cannot do. And Waterford's pretty fun case because over the 12 phases that the development is composed of, we saw all sorts of soils. We had a section that was pretty much all clay, and it was a challenge to just dig out and build. We've had on the south section some areas where it was just old organic material and old soil. Section 10 or section 8, I think, on the southeast, it was all sand. We actually had so much sand and so much fine material that the cul-de-sac at the bottom of it undermined and collapsed over winter just because of how much fine material there was in the utility ducts and in the soil, and it rained so much and it infiltrated so much water that all the fines basically created a huge void. The entire cul-de-sac dropped. So the soil on it matters, and it really sometimes drives which direction these developers can go and what they can or cannot do when it comes to detention, retention. I mean, ideally, you'd love to be able to just drop dry wells everywhere and have it infiltrated, but it's just unfortunately not always something possible.
And sometimes it's driven by what the housing market and those home buyers are wanting too. You see a shift on, not trying to tag you guys out, the younger generation, we're definitely seeing a shift in what they want on size of lots, they want small lots now, they don't wanna have to maintain anything, those type of things. So we see some of that too of, well, I don't want weeds back there, I want this nice pretty landscaped pond or those type of things. So you've got that going on, that battle too of the housing market trying to meet what different age generations are wanting for their type of housing too, of I want the landscape mowed lake, or I I don't want the weeds in my backyard, or I don't want swales in my backyard, and it's all a balancing act of what, because they don't necessarily, people don't always understand what some of those things do either. So it's definitely it's a balancing act too, so.
Can I get Nancy though first, because I hadn't forgotten that you were trying to ask a question.
Oh, I have 10 questions. No, I just, I think they've probably been answered, because I know, mainly my area is, that I'm aware of it. Well, in fact, how I got into this interest in stormwater, is through, Miami Conservancy District, because back when they were pushing on non-point source pollution, they were educating us about how to go to the council meetings and how to talk with your public officials about these kinds of things. And I remember once I went to one meeting, and I live in Oakwood, and it was, I don't know, it was where this was, but I was the only person at this meeting about stormwater issues or the non-point source pollution, and I, so why is somebody from Oakwood up here and, wherever it was? But it was because I was learning so much about the things, and so those programs that the Miami Conservancy District had, they were fantastic, especially the Headwaters programs. They would have workshops and things. But what Leanne talks about is I've noticed that we've lost the birding groups, the Native Plant Society became defunct, and we don't have organizations to replace that, because we educated people incredibly. And even though it was, just your fans, but just a couple of people, as you said, if you go to a meeting, people do listen to that. And that is, it's exasperating how, because when I see all the development that's going down in Washington Township and Centerville, they pack those houses in, they mow everything down, and they want that green lawn, and they water that lawn, 24 hours a day. It's all clay, which is concrete, and, but that's what they want.
Right.
And, how do I can't influence that at all. And it's just really sad because, everything that, to me, what we're talking about is not really stormwater management, but the beauty of all of this. That is what we're losing.
Well, and to your point, an MS4 is a municipality who is permitted by the OEPA. And they have a requirement that their, whatever they take in, the water quality they take in, has to be equal water quality when it leaves their city. So if one of the things that I see a problem with is that there's not education happening with our officials. We'll have people on boards and that sort of thing that are making decisions with no background in natural resources. And in my world, what's more important than water quality?
Yeah.
That's just how I roll. But anyway, they're realtors or they're bankers or they have no, it's not that they're not interested, they are not informed. And then so, some of the meetings that I've showed up in, I give them papers. Most people are visual learners. And I'll say, hey, here's the issue. Here is visually exactly what's gonna happen to the water quality.
So what meetings are you going to?
Oh, this was with Clark County. And this is a while back, anyway.
Like council meetings or,
Huh?
like city council meetings?
This was there's been, zoning of appeals, there's been township meetings, there's been several different. Well, anyway, my point is that I think there needs to be made an effort, and I don't think it should have to come from the citizens. I think there should be a an agency level effort to make sure that whoever is on a panel making decisions for the community, they have some kind of background in natural resources. What keeps our natural resources healthy? Number one, water quality. Number two, soil quality. Those go hand in hand. Stormwater is where it's all about, you know. Number three, you know, obviously air quality and that sort of thing, which is a little bit more nebulous. But I think that it should be an agency level thing where they should have some kind of packet, some kind of resource on a website, and some kind of requirement. If you're gonna be voted into an office, you should know something about what you're talking about, in my opinion. And you should know something about water quality. Sorry, I have no opinion on anything, as you can tell. But, you know, they should really, you should have, you know, do you know where your water comes from? Do you know what influences your water? If you're gonna be making decisions on our community's water, you should really know. You know, you're impacting us and our kids, so.
Is that a connection, and I've not seen a lot of the literature that these groups are putting out. Is there a missed opportunity in making the connection to the aquifer? Because vast majority of people are getting their water from a treatment plant. We're not surface water consumers. Is there a missed opportunity to leverage the connection to the, you know, Miami Valley aquifer, and the fact that the surface water, if all goes well, eventually makes its way to the aquifer?
Well, it
Because
depends
it's,
what kind
you
of
know,
a,
it's like, well, it's not my problem. I see it running down the street, but I'm never gonna have to worry about drinking that, so I don't really care, or whatever.
Well, we
Unless I'm
all
getting
live
mosquitoes
downstream.
in my backyard, I'm not too concerned about it. But boy, start talking about the stuff that's coming out of my tap, that's an important issue for everybody. Everybody has to have drinking water. So I'm just wondering, is that connection made that, we talk surface water, but it's like the aquifer is really where it's at in terms of.
well, not
public health
necessarily.
and consumption.
Yeah, I think the first indication that that connection is being made are the forever chemicals.
Right.
And you're seeing it very deliberately there. And, you know, that might be the one pollutant that grabs the attention enough to make it more uniformly, to make people recognize that surface groundwater connection. But that's only going to affect these lower parts of the aquifer. You know, unless they're using it in the upper parts of the watersheds, it doesn't get.
Up gradient, down gradient, or are you talking depth?
Well, no, I'm talking about upstream.
Okay.
Clark County isn't maybe as worried as Montgomery County because of that source, but that's the one thing I see that's really forced people's hand on that. And it'll be interesting to see how that sort of permeates to other pollutants that are not forever, but as toxic. And even in small quantities, and even the matrix effect when you start to mix these things. That's a big issue.
I had an idea on, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Another empowerment piece for citizens that takes pressure off of these guys is the media. Everybody complains about the media, there's a whole lot to complain about, don't get me wrong. But we should be calling them as well. You know, we can't expect the government to take care of everything. We are everywhere present. We citizens are everywhere, you know, we're the ones that has our hands in the water. We're impacting our own water quality every day. They can't be responsible for everything. And nobody gets the word out better than the media. So we should be on the horn saying, why are you guys not talking about this? Why are you only covering the same thing over and over and over, way out over there that doesn't, you know, I can't do anything about, but right here in our backyard, why are you not talking about that? And just get on their case, and they're local.
I appreciate hearing the education, a couple comments about education and the MCD has some history of that. And we are aware that we are not doing as much of that as we used to. And we desire to do more, and tying it to the aquifer is something that we can do, you know, because we have, you know, we work on all water at all levels, you know, from the sky down to the underground and the quality and quantity of that. So it's something we're talking about actively now. We have a lot of planning going forward, a large capital plan coming forward. But that's, just wanted you to hear that, I hear that, and that we are working on that and hope to help on that front.
In my house, I live, there's a Rubicon Creek runs behind my house. And then it's interesting, there's a divide up in Dayton And that, the water behind my house flows north down to the Great Miami, and then a little bit south, it flows south to the Little Miami through the Beaver Creek. And I thought, it was years before I learned, and you were talking about that before. Oh, we are all connected. It's amazing. And, but one of the things that I learned from MCD was we live in a woods, but young people are coming in, they love those green lawns, they cut down the trees, get rid of the shrubs and everything. Well, if you'd see my yard, it's all trees, it's woods. And so one time one of my neighbors, and she's real nice, but she said her house, in part of on the side yard of her house that's next to mine, there's flooding there, because when it rains, she'd have a big puddle. Well, because my yard's messy with the trees and things, she said, that they thought, well, it's probably her yard that's causing this. Well, I know that the water is absorbing and into my side, and so what she wanted me to do was to change the downspout from going to my front yard rather than toward her house. So anyway, and then right after she said that, there was this huge downpour. So I got my boots on and my umbrella, and I watched the water coming down from her downspout. It was fascinating. It absorbed for about 10 seconds or so, and then it welled up, and it made this gushing river into across her lawn, down the sidewalk into the gutter. And the water coming from my gutter, it was just totally absorbed in that, it's 12 feet there. I was waving the American
Sounds like you have
flag.
something you can teach your neighbors. I mean,
Yeah,
a lot of them
and
don't understand.
Yeah.
Take a
when I
video.
told them that,
Everybody's into those right now.
they can't, okay.
So I want to comment, you were talking about the small lots, how they were taking that out. I want to address that a little bit. And Stephanie touched on this a little bit. That's the trend that you're seeing. I don't think that's all bad. Those small lots were acre lots like they used to be, or 2 or 5, they're chewing up way more ground.
Right.
The water quality that we have to make them do, they have to expend more money to develop their system, to control the groundwater, the water quality, all that. All that's still being done, even when you see those packed in like that. And what they'll do then is leave green space areas, so we can't save everything, but they can save some areas that are less developable, but are the great areas for the groundwater recharge. So what you're seeing up front might be all these houses packed in here. You're like, well, well, yes, that was the prior farm ground or whatever, but you save this back here, you might not be able to see the trees when they put their walking paths in there, or there's possibly a wetland. So I'm not seeing the small lots necessarily as being a bad thing. I would rather see those than come in and chewing up my personal pet peeve, the 5-acre lots.
Yes.
I said, I need 2 more, I've got 2 ladies who have their hands up, and one has waited a very long time. If you remember what you wanted to ask.
Yeah, well, I wanted to make a statement, I guess, basically.
Okay.
So I think it's difficult for people to come to meetings, and a lot of times they don't even know the bigger picture. But what I am noticing is an increase in people who want to do something right on their own property. And especially planting native plants, native prairies, pollinators. So at the Yellow Spring Street Fair, we have a booth, a habitat booth, and I am amazed at how many people are doing it, want more information from all over who come to that street fair, which is a pretty wide area. And that does have an impact on stormwater, a positive impact on stormwater management. Of course, though, in a municipality, there are those residents and the legislation that does not support that. You know, the neighbor, well, it's like what you said. The neighbor that doesn't want to see a prairie beside her yard, or woods, or anything. So that, and I'm from Yellow Spring. So we've made some changes in our ordinance that you can have a managed natural landscape. But that is something I think that people could be going to their community about, because really a lot more people, I am pleasantly surprised.
I live in Oakwood, and Oakwood's allowing that now,
Oh,
and more and more. I mean, so it is, and if someone has the expertise, I'd like to see landscape companies started who can help, because a lot of people I talk to that are in our neighborhood are like, I don't know how to do it. So, but so I'm seeing the demand there on that,
Yeah,
where you
well,
might
it's
think
pretty
you want
good
it.
Right.
in
About
Oakwood,
their, they don't, I've always been kind of an outlier with with our yard. And, so I'm really amazed, because Oakwood's very hard to talk to in the city, they only give you 3 minutes. But they have changed the landscaping.
Right, and that's because, like,
Yeah.
it goes back to our theme, right,
Yeah.
is the community getting involved, and this is what we want now, yeah.
Yes, I want to kind of add on, because you've got a big advocate going on in Yellow Springs right now with Brandon. He used to be the Air Force Marathon Director. If- Yeah, so if you've seen some of the stuff that he's been doing with his whole yard and everything else, and he is doing a lot of education on, yeah, it's not actually in the village, but he is, from that perspective, he is doing a lot of education pretty much almost every day on his social media about the native plants and what he's doing in his yard and why he's doing everything else. He is, if you don't know him or follow him, I encourage you to, because he's doing a lot of the education as an individual, which is exciting from that standpoint, and he's getting that word out there. I know
Creating a
some-
social norm
He
kind of
is,
within.
he really is.
We've got a neighbor ourselves who's a science teacher, who's naturalized a whole lot of their yard too, it's very visible, and they've got it signed, like a
He's
certified.
taking out pieces of his yard constantly, so yeah.
There are, the National Wildlife Federation, you can be in their program, and then there's another one, I think, it's not Doug
Xerxes.
Ptolemy, but,
Xerxes
Xerxes
is
is
that
so,
lead to
and that's a
lead.
way, I think, to, people like to have that sign in their yard, or something, feel like they're part of something bigger.
And
I
it
think
kind of
co-
cuts down on the questions
It
too.
does. And I think COVID has influenced some of the education side of it too, from a standpoint of all of us were involved in a lot of activities, especially at the kid level, because if we can influence the kids, they bring it home to their parents and everything else, and it's like, why aren't we doing this, mom and dad and everything else? We had a huge stuff going with those kids, and a lot of those programs have not come back, or they've come back at a smaller level, like Soil and Water used to do a lot of stuff, education events, that all died during COVID, and a lot of that hasn't come back. The One World event did come back, correct? The Dayton Water, One World, One
Festival?
Dayton, One, I can't
The one
remember the
that's
name of it.
at UD,
Yeah, with the kids,
Yes.
that has finally come back.
I think so.
But there was a big lull in some of that education, and also the ways for us to get out that education is different now too, because people don't read newspapers anymore and those type of things. So our old ways of getting that information in people's hands and those type of things, we've lost some of those ways on how do we get that information in everybody's hands. And the news media doesn't find it sexy or exciting, so even though we may give them that stuff and say, hey, here's a story, here's what we're doing, those type of things, it doesn't make it because they've got other exciting things to cover.
What is if somebody from outside of the community, goes to, like if I would go to a Kettering meeting, what do people think about that? It's like, hey, you don't live here, we don't wanna hear from you.
You're gonna have some of that, honestly.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah, they wanna hear,
So
yeah.
It's
want the
just,
local
yeah.
citizens.
It's one of the reasons, it just happens. Usually ask name and address every time you present to it. That's one of the reasons, just, it's not that we don't, immediately write anyone off, but it's also important to know, whether it's somebody within the community speaking or somebody else, from outside of it. But, they sometimes provide great feedback. Sometimes they come in with some great opinions, or they're for things, or they're, being passionate or against something with good reason. And, I think it's just, part of the course. I don't think there's anything wrong, or if, somebody's feeling strongly about something, they should absolutely hear your voice. Like I said earlier, we are mostly driven and directed by council, and council is directly driven by the citizens. And if you don't make your voice heard, whether it's, something that affects where you work, or where you live, or in the area, or somewhere you care about, nothing changes, so.
Yeah, let's get this question here.
We live in an area that has swales, so we see them fill up with water. We go into a major street that went through a widening project for 3 years. And when they threw the plans out, and you go to talk to them, and we're going, it had swales as it is, had swales for 45, 50 years we've been there, always fine. Well, all the curbs went in, all the storm sewers went in, all this went in, and all of it's dumped into here. And why is this flooding? Well, there's the water being dumped in there. And we said, well, why didn't you just put swales back? It's been working for how many years? Well, that's how it's done now with concrete and curbs and stuff. And it's like, okay, well now, a mile down the road, there's a whole road that has swales that's 3 lanes wide and it works just fine. So are kids being educated now, I don't know, urban planning, whatever it is?
Are you in the
That
township
we know
or
a
the
civil
city?
engineer in a big city that if they don't have to, they don't put curbs and storm sewers, and they try to work with that kind of flow. So there's no flooding in some spot.
When you
Is
come in,
anybody being educated for that now, or is it just, you put the curbs in, the concrete and the?
some of that's driven depending on the roadway sections, whether you're curb section or, non-curb section.
But a lot of developments, do they need that? I
Well,
mean,
No, you were talking, you said they redid the road, so
Yeah.
when that comes back in, so I'm gonna take off my stormwater hat here and I'm gonna put on my dealing with the feds hat here, because it is two totally different things. So, if you have curb, your clear space is a lot closer up to that road than what it is if you have a non-curb section. And by clear space, that's where the poles have to be, you can't have anything in that clear space.
these poles are right on the curbs.
Well,
They are right on.
So that's why they did, so that's probably why they had to do curb.
Okay, but now let's go to a residential area, okay, I get you there.
So,
Why not a residential area? I've seen beautiful residential areas that, 10 years old, they have swales, they have a sidewalk.
Depends on
You know.
zoning, it depends on what that area wants to do.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, is anybody being educated that, it might be something better than,
We
Yeah.
have both happening in Greene County, and it really depends on what each township wants in
no,
their
I'm just
area.
saying though, like you said about being educated, and you said there are better ways than the way they say it has to be done. Is the mindset changing?
Yeah, no, it's,
typically as you go to
I'm trying to
smaller
think how I can
lots, you're
shorten my
gonna,
answer.
you're
Yeah.
gonna do curb, you're
Well,
gonna
I
do
guess
curb and
all I
gutter.
ever see is curbs and sidewalks.
Yeah, and
but
I
was
can-
like, this is a residential area,
Yeah.
you're supposed to be going 25 miles an hour, there's no
They
holes
don't,
around.
yeah, a lot of what we see, or at least from my perspective, with city development, at least within the city, a lot of that is driven by what's essentially, known as a complete street standard. And basically the city dictates that any new improvement, any new road has to meet this defined standard of what a complete street is. And that includes, curb and more importantly sidewalk. A lot of these unpaved, unimproved streets with open swales don't have sidewalk or don't
Well,
have.
there's one on.
There's some that do,
There are
there's some that do,
sidewalks.
but it's not defined and it's
Yeah.
not enforced. So with our complete streets, guidance, and a lot for like bigger improvements is actually required by regional groups. We require, we basically have, this is what a street in the city needs to look like. Sidewalk on both sides, curb, and, define whether it's 2-lane, 3-lane for residential or arterial and everything. And that is one of the reasons it's driven that way. It's because we want that right of way to have not just road, but pedestrian accommodations as well.
And that's part,
We went to one of those planning meetings, and they did quote that, oh yeah, that's what the standard says, that's what we have to do. And we said, well, why? And, that must be on my pay grade or whatever. But one of the dumbest things I saw was the sidewalks are sloped toward the street. They said, oh yeah, we're required to control the water off the sidewalks too. And I said, why? Before you had a whole street that drained into a swale and it didn't hurt anything. can't that sidewalk slope away from the street
And go
so that it goes into the yards? And they're like, well, no, you can't do that.
Yeah, a lot of that
Why?
is.
It's been that way for 100 years.
When
Why?
you
Yeah.
come into trying to do a 50-foot wide lot, if you're on trying to control drainage with swales and ditches, it's not gonna happen. Cause I deal with them on big ones, I mean, and just getting out the flow, because then that guy, he don't like the ditch, so he's gonna close it in. Well, Lowe's has 4-inch pipe on sale, and it really should, his drive culvert sitting there, and it's 24. If Lowe's has a 4-inch on sale and throws it in, it's not gonna work. And trying to control that in that, you're better off to do that way. This is my opinion, you guys can agree or disagree. But on these smaller lots, to drain that all into the street, because otherwise, we have no way of dealing with the drainage. If it's not in the street, I can't go in your yard and do it, and drain it to the street. I understand what you're saying, but
Just the sheet flow off of there onto the grass, there shouldn't.
but deal with that, what we're doing is moving that in and dealing with that in the green space areas.
Yeah.
But dealing with it on these lots, that's not,
You're putting it into a pipe which goes down and comes right into the creek as fast as it can, which is the concern we have is downstream.
that's, I mean, a new development wouldn't be able to do that.
I would add the, oh man, I lost my first thought. I'll go to the second one, because when you talked about a pipe going straight into the street, I think for all of us, I could speak for when we started our careers, and if you worked on any road projects, any road improvement projects like this, it was not a big deal to widen the road, put sidewalks in, take the ditches, put them into pipes, and you're done, without considering detention or, what that's doing to the streams. But that's changing now, so, and it's not, and it's not.
It is.
Right, and it depends, different communities at different times, but it goes back to, back to my first point, what I wanted to make was the planning, right? So you asked, are engineers getting trained this way, and what are they doing? And I assume that meant like what, in college, what classes you're learning.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of answers to that specific question and why in a certain neighborhood would do it a certain way, or a certain community would do it a certain way, but a lot of that is planning, and is that community planning, what do you want your community to look like? And that's done by going through these comprehensive plans. And there's maintenance issues with ditches, hit on a couple of them. Right-of-way size, developer might have this big of land and ditches take up more room than pipes do. There's a lot of details there. So it's hard to make a broad answer to that question. But I can say we're more, I think, as an industry, as a profession, we're more aware of it, and we're more aware of the options now.
I know Stephanie said that when you said you take a lot of heat for sticking up for what you believe, and that's what I was thinking. Are urban planning and whatnot, kids in college now, are they bringing that up to be a little more firm, like you said, to say, hey, this isn't really the best way to do this?
So I don't know if the professors are, but I know at least the people that we've interviewed and the young people we've hired in the last 5 to 10 years, they're challenging, I mean, in the interviews,
yes.
challenging us and challenging system is like, and talking about stormwater, talking about environmental and community involvement.
Asking
so-
why.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
We know the
So-
needle has moved in the industry because we're no longer solid gray infrastructure.
Right.
Green infrastructure is now a thing.
Yeah.
So we know the needle has moved.
Okay, that's
Now,
what I'm-
whether it's
Yeah.
specific location or not,
Yeah.
I don't know, but we do know the needle has moved in that direction.
I'm gonna get this one last question, and then maybe if you guys can hang on, we're way over time, actually. But if we could give a minute to each person, 1 minute to each person on the panel after we respond to this question, then we'll close out the night.
I know it's getting late, so I have a question about, that bounces off, say, where we started with Don's issue of increased rainfall. Because it's my understanding that wastewater treatment plants, if they are overwhelmed by rain events, they discharge human waste into then we're talking about surface water again. But I live downstream live on the Mad River, downstream from Springfield's wastewater treatment plant. Is there a solution to that, or is that, what should we be doing
Yeah,
about
It's
that?
about $45 million
Yeah,
for the city of Springfield.
Yeah.
But
A lot of
that's the
cities.
reality. It's $45 million in 40 years. But they're looking at green solutions now, and they've never looked at them before. but they're getting pushback actually from EPA on this, that it's in their experimental, it's outside of EPA's design criteria, so the consultants for the city of Springfield have sort of backed off on it because it's too big a push. But right now, they're dividing up the problem into a lot of green solutions. And it's mostly in the retention basins where they've got green space.
But it's limiting input into the system.
It's limiting the road runoff into the system that overwhelms the municipal waste.
Well, it
And
comes down
and you have some cities that have what they call combined systems. So some cities, up north, help me in the.
Springfield.
used to-
So that's
combined sewer
Right, but Cincinnati's a good example. Cincinnati's a huge example, and they have a battle going, and they always will. But there are some
Toledo.
large cities, Toledo, that's the one I was trying to think of, that have combined where their storm sewer and their sanitary come together in one system, and because that was the old way of doing it way back then. The plants can't treat all of that. So yeah, so when they get those large flush events that happen in the stormwater, now that plant is overwhelmed. Most of them are under EPA orders now of having to do something about it, whether they're doing separating systems or whether they're having to build storage systems or pump station. I mean, you name it, they're trying to be creative as they can within the budgets they can, but a lot of these cities are being forced to have to spend a lot of money,
Millions or billions?
millions
There's
and.
no cheap solution.
Yeah, there's no
Like,
cheap solution to do
yeah.
them, even if you go in and try to separate, that's not a cheap solution either, that these cities are having to do and required to do, and that's obviously the right thing too, but, cause you can't treat all that either, I mean, how big of a plant are you gonna build to
double,
treat?
right.
So it's a decision these cities are having to make of what to do. Fortunately, Fairborn, we're not that way.
No, we're not.
But some of these larger, older cities have some of that issues.
What's Fairborn do?
It's separate.
We're separate.
We got, yeah, separate wastewater and separate stormwater. We've actually, there's a couple of fringe areas in some of the really, really old sections where we're doing improvements and we'll actually catch a catch basin or an old pipe actually tying one way or the other. We obviously correct it as we can, but we have separate systems.
As a county, all of our systems are separate. In
Right.
Clark County, we don't have any combined, but in the city, and then it's not just at the plant, you also have combined sewer overflows.
Right.
So you got pipes running down the streets, all your sewage is in them. When it rains, the catch basins are tied in the same pipe. So the way that they used to do this was, so you got an 8-inch pipe run down this road, this road, this road, and they combined into a 24, and then you got another one coming from this neighborhood and it's an 18. Well, the plant will only take it at a 12-inch rate, so you got the 24 and 18 coming in, and only a 12-inch pipe going out. And then the sides cut out of the side of it, so it comes up, billows out, and out goes the sewage and rainwater mix when it rains.
The MCD built built multiple wastewater treatment plants about 60 years ago, and we got rid of them about 30 years ago, I think, just in time, maybe.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Well, nothing's getting cheaper, all these material prices are going up.
Well,
too.
let's do just a real quick pass down the line here. If you have 1 minute closing thoughts, something that you've been wanting to say and didn't have the opportunity, or something that's good for the good of the order. Dr. Ritter, would you start us off with a?
Well, I'd say that the changes in intensity of rainfall are gonna drive changes in how we deal with it. We're gonna have to rely on the environment more than we rely on the infrastructure, because we can't pay for the infrastructure.
Very good. Very good, Leanne?
Well, I want to say I appreciate every one of you for showing up to something like this. This is very important, and I think, the power is in the citizens, because we, like I said at the beginning, we are the only ones that are everywhere present all the time, and all of our hands are impacting our own water quality, and that's a powerful thing. And I would encourage you guys to mail educational flyers, maybe, I don't know, to your council members and that sort of thing, and help them get informed on what water quality is, take one more step and maybe invite a friend to a meeting. These are very, like they've been saying all night, you guys do make a difference.
Good. Don?
I'm gonna just add to that and reinforce that, I guess. There was a citizen here, and I can't remember his name, and I don't see him here tonight, I don't think. Alan,
Yeah.
yes. And he would call, and
Yep.
and I'll tell you the truth, there's a lot of staff members when you call, you get the eye roll, you know, and like, but we need help. Like
Right.
none of us city organizations, I know at the staff level, we don't have enough people, we don't have enough qualified people, we can't keep up with all the things we're tasked with to the level of quality that we want to. So, the citizens can help, right? And that was helpful when he would call. And sometimes it was nothing, but sometimes it was, we better go take a look at that. And our heads are down and funding, looking for grant applications and, you know, planning infrastructure projects. And it's just, and it's easy to put stormwater to the side, with everything else that's going on. So, so I just encourage, and we talk about having the public meetings and not many people showing up. Well, we're all busy too, right? I mean, this is a pretty good crowd, and it tells me that you're passionate about this topic. And I know there's more people out there that are passionate about this specific topic. But it's hard to find time to go connect, to go talk about this in detail on the citizen end, but also on the government end sometimes too, and maybe a lot of the times. So I just want you to hear that you help, and even if it's not getting on a board, but if it's seeing something and calling your city or your county or your township, and there's good intentions all over, you know, and this is something, there's a lot of things to disagree on, and all these different topics we work on in our jobs at government, there's a lot of disagreement, but water is something that is agreeable to most people. And there's a lot of great things happening, moving in the right direction, and I think we're making a lot of good decisions. But we need help to make it go faster. And if you can, any young people that are thinking of going to college, please encourage them to go into civil engineering. All right, that's it.
Very good. Stephanie?
Yeah, so I'll echo a lot of what they've already said. Appreciate you guys being here. This is great, seeing the interaction, seeing you guys involved, seeing you guys care. From that standpoint, we care about what we're doing as far as trying to protect the water quality and water quantity too. From the standpoint, I could share, in our office, I took over as Greene County Engineer in 2019. When I walked in the door, Greene County was in trouble officially with the EPA. They were in violation with the EPA, not enforcing stormwater regulations, and not a lot of stuff in place. We are out of trouble from that perspective. And yes, I have taken a hell of a lot of heat from the developers and from my commissioners and you name it, of you're asking too much, everything else. It's like, no, we're asking what should have been asked of them before and wasn't happening. We're holding them to the requirements they're supposed to be doing. We're holding them accountable. We treat everybody the same. I don't care if you're a little developer, a big developer. We're gonna treat you all the same. We're holding you the same requirements when it comes to stormwater. We have doubled our staff. Like I said, we are officially out of trouble with the EPA. The EPA even used us as an example earlier this year and brought some other people out to train in our county to see what we were doing. So we were like, okay, we've done that about circle. So that's great. We have 3 inspectors out, 3.5 inspectors out regularly in our plats, overseeing construction in our developments and those type of things, which are looking at stormwater, looking at erosion, looking at sediment in streets, make sure that's not happening. Stuff's in place to keep all that being done correctly. From that perspective, and we are making a difference. We're not getting all those complaints we used to get of there's mud in the streets, there's all this, I've got brown water coming out of my catch basin every time, everything else. Those complaints are down to this. I mean, we have a few every once in a while, we're gonna have that happen, but in general, that is way down. We've got that bar set with our developers and they get it. We're gonna hold them to it and they're gonna do it right. And I think you're seeing that is, they've accepted it, and they might bitch about it, but they're accepting it. And we're trying to do what's right for you guys and keep what you guys want, so.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll say is, and I'm not saying this because I want more work, but I can't emphasize how important it is. You need to complain more, and I mean that.
Wait, let me record that.
To council, to me, you gotta call the department, call council, call office, anytime we have an issue. The engineering department, specifically for us Fairborn, I'm the engineer, I'm the only engineer in the department. I got 2 inspectors, I got a GIS specialist, I got a traffic specialist, and I got our office admin handling the calls for all the public works. That's it. We are in charge of handling all the construction projects, all the stormwater improvements, we're handling now some of the water line projects, we're handling all the subdivisions. There's a lot of moving pieces across the city that we have to oversee. We have all our right-of-way inspections. We're always working on something. If you don't call and complain when there's an issue or there's this flooding or something, if you don't call, we don't know, genuinely. And that's the only reason a lot of these recent projects and a lot of the recent initiative that we've had is because people call us and people tell us. And if we don't get an answer in time or we're not doing enough, they take it up the chain and they let council know, and council ask us, why are we not doing anything about it? That is how we are steered, that's how our department, that's how I can drive my department to focus on what needs to be focused. But if I don't have anything to fix because no one's complaining about it, I'll just focus on what I'm working on. So it's really important to let us know. And to speak on the comment someone made earlier about sometimes being difficult to being to these committee meetings and going to council. All of the cases, all of the information, everything that's going to planning board, everything that's going to council is posted online. It's publicly available. You can write an email feedback. They read and they receive and they comment on all of those. You can write letters to it. Any form of communication you send to it, they will see it because we'll get questions about it. So you don't have to go to council. You don't have to go to planning board to let your opinion and let your voice be heard. So please complain more. It's all I can say.
You haven't been city engineer long enough, have you?
No.
And last but not least, sir.
Okay. The other thing is, I'm not saying call and complain.
John, what's your number?
BR 549.
You showed your age on that joke.
Learn how your government works. That's the biggest thing. Are you in the city? You have a council that controls everything, that controls the engineer? Because if you call him, he's not the direct line. He can only do what council lets him do. Stephanie and I were elected. We deal direct with you. I do not work for the commissioners of Clark County. She does not work for the commissioners of Greene County. Do we communicate? Yes, we do, and sometimes they get it. But when you know where you're at and know how your government works, so you know who to call. If you're in the county, you call your county engineer or your township trustees, whether you're on a county or township road. A lot of people don't even know that, and so it's like when it snows, who goes by your house? Is it a township truck or is it a county truck? Oh, it's county. Well, then you're on a county road. But learn who to call. That's the biggest thing. Learn how it works, and not just your local stuff. You're on up to the state level. You got to know who to call, because if you're calling the wrong person, you're expending a lot of time and effort, which nobody has enough of. Let's be honest, and you're expending it on the wrong person. Learn who your state rep is. Learn their area. Learn who your state senator is. Learn that, know that, but especially know that, because I get people call me. I've been accused of being blunt before, believe it or not. Well, I'm going to call the commission and have them tell you to do it. Well, you're welcome to call them, but that's not how this works. So, like I said, know who to call is the big thing.
If you are in Greene County, go to our website. We have a link for Greene County Engineer. Go to our website. There's a road responsibly map on our website. Click on any road in the county. I don't care where, whether you're inside a city or wherever. If you don't know where you live, click on that road. It's going to tell you whose road it is. And believe me, we get those calls all the time, and people are like, and we have to tell them, no, you live in Beaver Creek City, or no, you live in Jamestown, or whatever. But we've made a map specifically for that. You can click on any road, and it's gonna tell you exactly who to call, a phone number, and even a website, if they have one.
And I want to just wrap up again to thank you for coming and to recommend that since you all are now super educated and you all have connections, you're part of the process here to educate your circle of influence, you know? Take your friends in Kettering to coffee and talk to them about what their council is doing and whatnot. And then you can help. I have a couple brunch friends and they don't know about forever chemicals. I'm like, don't you read the paper? I'm like, no.
Angela, before you dismiss us, I know there's people in the room that have worked on trying to get the Mad River designated a state scenic river. There's an important bill in the Senate right now, in the current 135th General Assembly, Senate Bill 156. It's gonna help facilitate future designations of scenic rivers. It'll help the Mad River situation. If you wanna know more about it, I'll hang around.
156.
156.
House bill, Senate bill.
Senate Bill 156. So if you don't know about it, find out about it, we'll talk about it.
And
That's especially for Bob down there on the end.
Oh,
Thank you.
Leanne found a tree calculator.
Yeah, the tree volume calculator, there are actually two, Division of Forestry and Division of Agriculture. If anybody's interested in calculating volume, stormwater volume for you engineers, I'm sure you love that.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you to our panelists for definitely sharing your wisdom tonight.
The ones you're talking about.
Cookies, wait, did I hear cookies?
That was, they were actually, those gates were operated before I went.
Great, do a presentation for my
They stopped using
water
because it
source.
was.
I'm retired from MCD.
I think it's great data, because they want to
There, and then they stopped using it.
disaster preparedness.
And so I asked about it at the time, and they're like, no, we're not using this
Last year,
because it's really
presentation
just
was
houses.
on,
As you get back there, they built up,
climate change.
built it all.
That was one of those, that wasn't.
What is that about? It's actually,
It starts backing up.
And they're talking about a project and it never got off the ground.
but, they're at,
So that's why those
went
weren't being
and
used.
did it, and now they want to,
That's what I figured too.
I want to do, what are our,
That was just kind of ironic because both of those are
what are our numbers?
flooding and we're not Yeah, yeah.
They're not gonna use it because they're
That predated me, so yeah.
I've been there.
Because I remember getting a complaint, we can't get one to work.
If I can get local data,
They were trying to fix it.
they all look the same. This is what we're seeing. I like the bigger ones, and then have a couple of sites that are just projections. Not Southwest Ohio or anything like that. I mean, we have the tri-state region, or maybe 4 or 5 state region. That's about as narrow jurisdiction as I can get. But, if you want some data,
Yeah, and I probably, and I can help you, I'm happy to help you.
I know you're here. Most everybody.
Any of you
So what, any particular role you want to do with the organization or?
He does a lot of presentations talking about
for USDA for calculating retention, detention, often that program is updated. So is it a yearly update? Because theoretically, it's based on 30-year rolling averages. I thought they were part of TR 55. The runoff tables I'm talking about. The rainfall runoff.
Well, the curb numbers, the runoff.
I'm a private sector, so I don't have to,
Are
I don't work for you anymore.
Runoff.
So,
But it's really not.
Calculation runoff.
I think
I don't know.
How do we know when a PE hired by a developer,
so, but yeah,
how do we
we'll
know they're using the latest software when they do their calculations?
We get all this.